In 1875, a woman stepped off a train with $3 in her pocket and a powerful man hunting her across the country. Evelyn Moore had refused to marry Thomas Ashford, so he vowed to destroy her. She walked up to a stranger's ranch, ready to beg for any work, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, anything to survive. But the rancher looked at her worn-out boots and her desperate eyes and offered her something she never expected. Not charity, not pity, a partnership. What Evelyn didn't know, Thomas Ashford was coming. And when he found her, he wouldn't just demand she return. He would threaten to lock her in an asylum unless she married him. This is the story of a woman who asked for a job and found the one thing that could save her life, a man who saw her as an equal. Stay until the satisfying end. This story will remind you, the way someone treats you when you have nothing reveals everything about who they really are. And sometimes respect is the greatest form of love. If you believe real partnership can change a life, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far Evelyn's story travels. And if stories about strong women and second chances speak to your soul, subscribe and hit that bell. You belong here. The Wyoming wind cut right through Evelyn Moore's thin cloak. She stood on a dirt road staring at a ranch that was her last hope. After 3 weeks of running, she was bone-tired and starving. The ranch looked solid, a world away from her troubles. There were log buildings, cattle in the corrals, and smoke curling from a chimney. Her knees almost gave out, but she held onto a fence post. She had come too far to quit now. She had left Philadelphia with nothing, running from a man named Thomas Ashford. Just thinking his name made her sick. She forced herself to stand tall and push open the gate. A man came out of the barn. He was tall and broad and moved like he owned the ground he stood on. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see he was watching her with suspicion. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough. Evelyn's planned words disappeared. "I need work," she said, her own voice sounding strange. "Any kind of work. I can cook, clean, or mend. I am a hard worker." The man walked closer. His face was weathered and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. He looked right through her, and she refused to look away. "You running from something?" he asked, straight to the point. There was no sense in lying. "Yes." "The law?" "No." "A husband?" "No." "Then what?" Her throat went tight. "A man who thought he owned my future." Something changed in the rancher's eyes. He saw the hunger and exhaustion on her face. "Name's Caleb Hart," he said. "This is my place." "Evelyn Moore." "Ever worked a ranch, Miss Moore?" "No, but I learned fast." He almost smiled. "Those folks who say that are lying. But you got honest eyes. I don't need a cook or a cleaner. I have men for that." Evelyn's heart sank. She had come all this way for nothing. "What I need," Caleb went on, "is a partner." She just stared at him, confused. "This ranch needs more than just muscle," he explained. "It needs someone who can think and plan, someone to handle the books and suppliers." "Can you read and write?" "Yes, I handled my father's bookkeeping for 5 years." Caleb nodded. "Then you're too smart to be scrubbing floors. The question is, are you willing to do the work that matters?" She was stunned. She expected to be a servant, not an equal. "I don't know the first thing about ranching," she said. "You'll learn. You said you learn fast." "Why offer this to me, a stranger?" "Because I need the help, and you need a place," he said. "And maybe you're just what this ranch has been missing." A gust of wind blew between them. It was a crazy offer, maybe even a trap. But looking at Caleb Hart's steady gaze, she did not think so. And what other choice did she have? "I accept," she said. Caleb gave a single sharp nod. "Come on then. You look like you're about to fall over." He walked toward the house without looking back. Evelyn made her legs move and followed him inside. The main room was large and warm, with a huge stone fireplace. It was clean and simple, built for work, not for show. An older man with silver hair looked up from a stove. "Found someone on the road," Caleb said. "Evelyn Moore, this is James Crawford. He runs this house." James looked her over, then pointed to a chair. "Sit down before you fall down." As soon as she sat, her strength left her. James put a bowl of hot stew in front of her. The smell was so good it hurt. She ate the first bowl like a wild animal. James just refilled it without a word. She ate the second one slower, tasting the rich beef and potatoes. When she was finally done, she saw both men watching her. Their eyes were not filled with pity, just a quiet understanding. Caleb asked the simple question, when was the last time you had a real meal? Have you ever seen someone push so far they'd rather walk across the country in ruined boots than accept a gilded cage? That was Evelyn Moore when she arrived at Caleb Hart's ranch. She was fleeing a future she didn't choose, and her expensive leather boots, now cracked and gaping, told the whole story of her long journey from Philadelphia. Caleb, the ranch owner, didn't offer charity. He offered a deal, a warm room and a week's trial to see if she could work. For Evelyn, who hadn't eaten a real meal in days, this was a lifeline. But Caleb had one question, his voice dead serious. The man she was running from, was he likely to follow her all the way out here to Texas? Evelyn could only hope he wouldn't. After Caleb left, his foreman James poured Evelyn a mug of coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. He told her Caleb was a hard man, but always fair. He said if Caleb called her a partner, he meant it. Evelyn wondered why a stranger would offer her such a chance. James reckoned Caleb wasn't just looking for a ranch hand. He was looking for someone who saw potential in the land the way his late brother used to. He said Caleb knew all he needed to know when she showed up with worn-out shoes and didn't ask for a handout. But the warmth of the room and the food in her belly were too much. Exhaustion hit Evelyn like a physical blow, and she could barely keep her eyes open. James led her up to a small, clean room with a thick blanket on the bed. He promised to leave some clean clothes by her door and told her to sleep as long as she needed. The moment the door closed, the weight of the last few weeks crashed down on her. Safe for the first time in a long time, Evelyn finally let herself cry. She woke late the next day to find a set of men's clothes waiting for her, just as James had promised. They were huge on her, but they were clean and whole. Downstairs, Caleb was at the table with his account books. He didn't comment on her late start. He just pointed to a chair and said it was time to get to work. After a quiet breakfast, Caleb pushed a dusty ledger across the table. He told her to look over the last 6 months and tell him what she saw. It took Evelyn less than 5 minutes. Her father, a mill owner, had taught her that numbers don't lie. She pointed to the expenses for cattle feed. The prices were too high. She showed Caleb how the cost for the same amount of feed had jumped from $12 to $18 in just a few months. She told him someone was either taking advantage of him or there was a serious problem with his supplier. Caleb stared at the numbers, a look of surprise on his face. He couldn't believe he had missed it. Evelyn didn't stop there. She pointed out that his payroll was a mess and suggested a simpler way to manage it. Impressed, Caleb asked about her father's business. She explained he owned a textile mill before he died, and the man who bought it was Thomas Ashford. His son, Thomas Jr., was the man she was running from. He had decided that owning her father's mill meant he also owned her. When she refused to marry him, he threatened to ruin her. Caleb's jaw set hard. He said men like that were cowards who deserved a lesson. But Evelyn knew they were often too rich and powerful to ever face real consequences. He won't be coming after you. Caleb's words were simple and sure. Men like Thomas Ashford Jr. crave easy wins, not a chase across the country for a woman who said no. That simple truth washed a month of fear right out of Evelyn. The relief was so strong it felt like a punch to the gut. She had imagined him hiring men to drag her back, but Caleb was right. Thomas wanted a trophy, not a partner. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb just nodded. "Now I have 3 months of ledgers to get through. You up for a ride this afternoon? You cannot run a ranch from behind a desk. I will probably fall off." "You probably will," he said, standing up, "but you will get back on." Over the next week, Evelyn learned what being a partner truly meant. It meant waking before the sun, riding across endless pastures, and yes, falling off her horse twice. It meant getting right back on, every single time. It meant learning the land, the cattle, and the hard work that held it all together. It meant sitting in on meetings where men twice her size looked at her with doubt in their eyes. Her hands bled from roto burns and her back ached constantly. But Caleb treated her exactly as he promised, like an equal. He corrected her mistakes without apology and acknowledged her successes with a simple nod. The 6 ranch hands were slow to trust her. They were hardened men who had seen bosses come and go, but Caleb made it clear she was not just a guest. When she found errors in the bunkhouse accounts, he backed her authority completely. Slowly, they started to see her worth. The first to come around was a young man named Danny, barely 20 years old. He started pointing things out on their rides, teaching her how to spot a sick animal or read the clouds for rain. "You are learning this faster than most, Miss Moore," he said one day. "I have to," she replied. "I do not have anywhere else to go." "Was that why you came here?" he asked, his curiosity plain. "At first," she admitted, "but now I want to see what this place can be." Later that night, she found Caleb in the barn, checking a horse's hoof. "That mare threw a shoe," he said, without looking up. "Needs the farrier." "I can take her to town tomorrow," Evelyn offered. "I have to pick up the supply order anyway." He lowered the horse's hoof and straightened up. "You have done good work this week," he said, his face shadowed by the lantern light. "Better than I figured. You thought I would fail. I thought you would quit," he admitted. "Most city folk do. But you work hard and you do not complain. That means something." A warmth bloomed in her chest. It was pride, and it was the approval of a man who did not give it lightly. "I told you I was a quick learner. So you still want to stay?" "Yes, even with the hard work and the cold winter coming." Even then. Caleb watched her for a long moment, then held out his hand. "Partners then, officially." Evelyn shook his calloused hand. The grip was firm, a promise sealed in the dim light of the barn. "Partners," she agreed, not knowing she had just set her entire future in motion. She did not understand that the warmth she felt was the first spark of something that would get her through the brutal winter. All she knew was that she had run from one man's control only to find another man's respect. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. The wind howled outside, but Evelyn did not mind. She was right where she needed to be. Winter came down from the mountains with a vengeance that year. By November, the snow was deep and the cold was a physical thing, a pain that settled deep in your bones. This was not like the city cold she knew. Out here, there was no hiding from it. The cattle had to be fed and the ice on the water troughs had to be broken, no matter how low the temperature dropped. She learned to wrap her hands and face against the biting wind. Learned that the numbness that followed the pain was the most dangerous part. "You are tougher than you look," Caleb remarked one morning, his breath making a cloud in the dark air. "I just feel cold," she said. "But you are still here," he answered, "and that is what matters." His quiet praise was a small, warm stone she carried with her. Under her watch, the ranch began to change. The account books were finally in order. She had saved them enough money on supplies that Caleb could hire another hand for the winter. She even sewed curtains for the main house, making the Stark rooms feel more like a home. The ranch hands started treating her with a quiet respect. Danny even asked her to teach him about bookkeeping. But it was Caleb's opinion that mattered most. He started asking what she thought about selling cattle, or buying a new bull, or how to settle a dispute between two of the men. "What do you think?" he would ask, and he would actually listen to her answer. She told herself her growing feelings for him were just admiration. But she knew deep down that she was lying to herself. The town of Clearwater was 8 miles east. Evelyn rode in for supplies every 2 weeks. Mrs. Henderson, the woman who ran the general store, watched her with open curiosity from her very first visit. Finally, the older woman could not hold back any longer. "So you are the one staying out at the Hart place," she said as Evelyn packed flour into her saddlebags. "Yes, ma'am. Must be quite an adjustment for a city girl." Later that week in town, the general store owner, a woman named Mrs. Henderson, recognized Evelyn. She knew all about Caleb's brother Samuel. She told Evelyn that Samuel had been the one with the real vision for the ranch. He had dreamed of building it into something more than just a place for cattle. He wanted to build a community. But Samuel had died tragically, and Caleb had never been the same. Mrs. Henderson paused, looking at Evelyn with knowing eyes. She said that maybe, just maybe, when Caleb looked at Evelyn, he saw someone who could help bring his brother's forgotten dream back to life. Folks in town figured Evelyn was just some mail-order bride, another mouth for Caleb Hart to feed. They didn't see the grit behind her eyes. This is the story of how one woman faced with disaster proved that a person's real worth is shown when everything is on the line. Stick around to see how she saved more than just a herd of cattle. On the ride home, Evelyn couldn't shake the storekeeper's words. She had been so focused on surviving, on proving she could handle the work, she had not really thought about the future. But as she looked at the snow-covered mountains, she started to dream. She imagined better cattle, a horse training business, maybe even a small dairy. She was lost in these thoughts when she arrived at the ranch to find complete chaos. Men were yelling and running in the swirling snow. Caleb was waving his arms, shouting orders. Evelyn jumped off her horse and ran to him. A sudden storm shift had trapped nearly 200 cattle against a ravine. Losing them would ruin the ranch. Caleb told her to stay back, to help in the barn. He wanted to protect her, but Evelyn knew he needed every rider he had. "I can ride and I can follow orders," she told him, stepping so close he had to look her in the eye. "You need me out there." After a long, tense moment, Caleb gave in. He had the men find her a heavier coat and a steady horse. 20 minutes later, Evelyn rode into the worst blizzard she had ever seen. The wind felt like a solid wall, trying to push her right out of the saddle. The snow flew sideways, stinging her face and making it impossible to see more than 10 feet ahead. The cold was brutal. It burned her lungs with every breath and made her fingers feel useless inside her gloves. But she kept riding, because those cattle needed help, and Caleb was counting on her. When they finally reached the pasture, she saw the terrifying scene. A huge mass of cattle, wild-eyed with fear, were packed against the edge of the ravine. Some had already fallen in the deep snow. Caleb yelled over the wind that they needed to split the herd into smaller groups and drive them back toward the barn. What came next was the most frightening thing Evelyn had ever done. She rode straight into that panicked herd. Her smart horse, Belle, seemed to know exactly what to do, cutting out small groups of cattle and pushing them towards safety. Evelyn lost all sense of time, focused only on the job. Separate, drive, and repeat. Her hands and legs were completely numb from the cold, but she kept going. She never saw the steer that broke from the herd until it was charging right at her. Belle reared up, throwing Evelyn onto the frozen ground. The air rushed out of her lungs, and she saw the steer's hooves coming down just inches from her face. Suddenly, Caleb was there. He put his horse between her and the danger and pulled her up behind him with incredible strength. He rode them to safety before turning to ask if she was hurt. She told him she was just shaken. She slid off his horse, found Belle waiting calmly nearby, and rode back into the storm before he could tell her to stop. They worked until every last animal was safe. By then it was pitch black and dangerously cold. Back at the barn, they treated the cattle for frostbite and cuts. Evelyn worked right alongside the men until Caleb took the medicine from her numb hands and ordered her inside. In the warm kitchen, she nearly collapsed. Another ranch hand, James, caught her and helped her to a chair. When he pulled off her boots, her toes were waxy and white. James said it was frostbite and began to warm them up slowly. The pain was unbelievable, like 1,000 sharp needles stabbing into her feet. Evelyn bit her lip to keep from crying out, but in that moment, something had changed. In Caleb's eyes, she was no longer just his wife. She was a true partner who had faced the storm with him and won. Caleb came in looking plumb wore out, shaking snow from his boots. He went straight to Evelyn. "How bad is she?" James said her toes were frostbit, but she would be fine after a few days of rest. Caleb looked relieved. "We lost 12 head of cattle, but we saved near 180. He looked right at Evelyn, his gaze heavy. "You did a damn mighty good job out there." "I fell," she admitted. "But you got back on," he said. "That is what counts." The other hands came in, just as tired and frozen. As they ate, Pete spoke up. "Miss Moore rode like she was born to the saddle. Never seen anything like it." Danny nodded. "She did not quit, not for 1 second. We could not have done it without her." Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her that was not from the fire. These men finally saw her as one of their own. Later that night, Caleb found Evelyn soaking her feet by the stove. He looked troubled. "I should not have let you go out there today," he said quietly. "You needed every hand you could get," she replied. "I needed help, but I did not need you risking your neck." He struggled to find the words. "It is different for you. The other men, they know the risks of this life. You are only here because you had nowhere else to turn. I put you in danger." "You did not put me anywhere," she said, her voice firm. "I chose to ride out. I made the choice to stay when things got tough. Those were my decisions, not yours. You just do not get it." "Oh, I believe I do," Evelyn said, pulling her feet from the water. "You think I need protecting just because I am a woman who showed up at your door with nothing," she said. "I needed a chance and you gave it. What I do with that chance is on me. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. You are right. That was not fair of me to say. He paused. But when you were shaking on my horse, all I could think about was my brother. Sam, I could not save him. I am not your brother, Caleb. I know, he said, his voice rough. But losing you, it would take something important from this ranch, from me. The truth of his words filled the quiet room. Her heart hammered in her chest. I am not going anywhere, she whispered. Good, he said, then quickly stood. Get some rest. He was gone before she could say another word. Alone in the kitchen, she finally admitted the truth. She was falling for Caleb Hart. It was a dangerous thought. She had run from one man, Thomas, who tried to own her, but Caleb was different. He saw her as a partner. When he held her on that horse, she had not felt trapped. She had felt like she was home. The next 2 weeks were hard. Everyone worked from sunup to sundown fixing fences and finding lost cattle. Evelyn's feet were still healing, so she managed the ranch's books and supplies. And late at night, she began to write down her own ideas for how to make the ranch better. She had a plan to make the ranch thrive, with new shelters, better feed, and stronger cattle. It was all there in 12 pages of smart, calculated work. Caleb read the whole thing without a word. He set it down and just looked at her. He admitted he'd had some of the same ideas, but could never make the numbers work. She had. In 2 or 3 years, they could build the ranch his brother Sam always dreamed of, a place that could survive any storm. Then let's do it, she said. A look of respect softened Caleb's face. You really think this place is worth it? It's worth fighting for, Evelyn told him. And I'm committed to what we are building here. When she said we, something shifted between them. They were no longer just boss and worker. They were partners, laying a foundation for something more than a ranch. All right then, Caleb said, his voice low. We fight. And they would fight together. The wind finally settled outside, and the winter stars shone bright in a clear sky. Evelyn looked out at the snow-covered ranch and realized for the first time she was truly home. The man across the table, studying the future she had written for them, was a part of that home. She couldn't find the words to say it, but when their eyes met, she had a feeling he already knew. The next morning, the ranch was buzzing with excitement. Pete had ridden over with an invitation to the town's winter celebration that night. James stood by the window, watching the hands get all worked up. First one since before the war, he said. Evelyn saw Caleb in the yard with Pete, his arms crossed, shaking his head. He doesn't want to go, she said. Caleb's not one for crowds, James agreed, but it would be good for business, and the men are excited. You should be the one to convince him. Evelyn looked at James, confused. Why me? Because he listens to you, James said with a knowing look. Besides, a change of scenery would do you good. The thought of a party was surprisingly welcome. When Caleb came inside, shaking snow from his coat, she got straight to the point. We should go to the celebration. He looked surprised she brought it up first. I don't dance. I am not asking you to dance, she said, keeping her tone strictly business. It is good for our reputation. People do business with folks they trust. He looked at her for a long moment. You sound like Sam. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. You really want to go? Yes, she said. The men have earned it. Fine, he finally agreed, though he grumbled. But if one of those town ladies asked me to dance, I am leaving. Evelyn felt a sharp, unexpected pang of jealousy at the thought. Well, she said lightly, you can just tell them you already have a partner. Caleb's eyes snapped to hers and the kitchen went silent. He gave a single nod, then walked out. James watched her with a knowing smile. That man is blind, he muttered. Just be sure to wear something nice. The town hall was packed, warm with lanterns and the sound of music. Evelyn wore her best dress, a simple green wool gown that James had helped her sew. She felt a little nervous, but as soon as they walked in, Caleb placed a steadying hand on her back. Miss Henderson found them right away, her eyes taking in every detail. Mr. Hart, what a surprise. And Miss Moore, how lovely to see you. Miss Moore talked me into it, Caleb said. Said it was good for business. Being the only woman in Wyoming who was a business partner instead of a wife got you a whole mess of looks. Evelyn felt them all as she shook hands at the town social with Caleb a solid presence at her back. Some folks looked shocked, others confused, and a few seemed plain impressed. The banker's wife, bless her heart, sniffed and said, "Well, that's certainly unconventional." Evelyn just smiled. "Most things out here are, ma'am. We're all making new rules." All the while, Caleb's hand rested on the small of her back. It was a simple touch, but every single person in that room saw it. It was a warning, a promise, and a claim all rolled into one. When the fiddle and guitar struck up, the floor filled with happy couples. Evelyn watched them, her foot tapping a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Caleb's voice was low beside her. "You look like you're starving for a dance." She felt a blush creep up her neck. "It's been a while." He was quiet for a second, then nodded toward a young cowhand. "Dance with Danny. He's a good kid, won't step on your toes or your boundaries." Before she could argue, he'd waved Danny over. "Danny, Miss Moore would like a dance. Ask her proper." The boy flushed but stood up straight. "Miss Moore, would you do me the honor?" Evelyn glanced at Caleb, then gave the young man a real smile. "I would be delighted." Danny was a decent dancer, full of spirit, and soon Evelyn was laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. She danced with one partner after another, feeling the tension of the past few weeks melt away. All through it, she felt Caleb's eyes on her from across the room. She was catching her breath over a cup of punch when a voice behind her turned her blood to ice. "Evelyn Moore, I thought that was you." She turned slow to face Marcus Brennan, a snake from her past she prayed she'd never see again. He worked for the man she'd run from. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice steady as a rock, "what brings you out to this country?" His eyes roamed over her. "Business. Thomas was mighty worried when you disappeared." It was a lie, smooth as saloon whiskey. "Heard you were working as a servant," Brennan sneered. "Quite a fall from society." The insult was meant to sting. "I'm a partner," she said, her voice sharp. His smile was cold. "Thomas will be so relieved to hear you're safe. I should probably send him a wire." That was a threat, plain and simple. Just as she opened her mouth, a new voice cut in, low and dangerous. "Miss Moore is with me." Caleb stood beside her, seeming to take up upon the air in the room. "And we don't take kindly to strangers making threats." Brennan sized Caleb up and seemed to shrink a little. "No threat intended." Caleb's eyes were like chips of flint. "She looks like she wants you to leave." "I was just going." "Good," Caleb said. It was an order, not an observation. Brennan turned and vanished into the crowd. Evelyn started to tremble. "He'll tell Thomas where I am." Caleb's voice was calm. "Then he'll have to come through me, and I don't lose what's mine." It wasn't a threat of ownership. It was a promise of protection. Back at the ranch, Caleb caught her arm before she could head inside. "Don't run," he said softly. "I can see you thinking it. Don't." He looked her straight in the eye. "If Thomas comes, we handle it. Together. This is your home now, Evelyn. Don't let that man's shadow scare you out of it. You're not alone anymore." "What if I bring trouble down on you?" she whispered. "That's what partners do. We handle trouble." "You keep calling me that," she said. "Are you a partner?" "Because that's what you are," he said, his voice rough with frustration. "What else would I call you?" The words she wanted to hear hung between them in the cold night air. The next morning she found him at the kitchen table with papers spread out. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He looked up, his face serious. "I was thinking about how to protect you if that man comes calling." He tapped a finger on the papers. "Tell me something. What would happen if you were to marry someone else? Would that end his claim on you for good?" The question landed hard. Was he suggesting she marry someone just for protection? Evelyn's heart hammered. She set her cup down. "I will not trade one cage for another," she said, her voice steady. Caleb looked at her. "Marriage is not always a cage. The law says a woman becomes property, but not in my house." The words hung in the air, full of meaning. Evelyn stared, trying to understand his offer. "Are you proposing to me?" she finally asked. "I am saying," Caleb met her eyes, "that if you needed that kind of protection, I would stand with you. I would make it legal and keep you safe." It was the least romantic offer ever made. It was a business deal meant to save her. But beneath the plain words, she heard what he was not saying. He cared enough to tie his life to hers to keep her safe, even if he could not call it love. "That is a generous offer," she said, her voice shaking. "But I do not think it will come to that." She stood up quickly, needing space. I should check the supply inventory. She left before he could answer, her mind in a storm. He had offered a practical, loveless marriage, and she had run. The day passed in a heavy silence. That evening, Caleb called a meeting with all the ranch hands. A man who works for a powerful enemy approached Miss Moore, he announced to the room. He tried to force her into a marriage she did not want. I need to know if you will stand with us if he decides to make trouble. Pete spoke first. Let him try. He will not get far. Danny nodded. Miss Moore is one of us now. Anyone who tries to take her has to go through all of us. The other men agreed, their faces firm. Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. These men, who were once strangers, were now her family. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, but I do not want anyone getting hurt because of me. Pete just smiled. Too late for that. You are stuck with us. Later, when they were alone, Caleb spoke to her. They meant what they said, Evelyn, and so did I. He turned from the fire to face her. I am not a man who is good with words, he began. When I found you, I saw someone who needed shelter, and I needed help. It was a partnership, but that changed. You worked hard and you refused to quit. You fit into this place like you were always meant to be here. He stepped closer. When I thought that steer might kill you, something inside me broke. I realized that losing you would be worse than losing this entire ranch. He took a deep breath. My offer this morning was cowardly. I was hiding behind practical reasons because I was afraid to speak the truth. You deserve the plain truth. His eyes were steady and sure. I want you to stay, not as my partner. I want you to be my wife, my equal, the person I build my life with. I am still afraid, she whispered. Afraid of being controlled. I do not want to control you, Caleb said, his voice firm. I want to stand beside you. There is a world of difference. He was not Thomas. She searched his face and found only patience and something that looked a whole lot like love. I do not need proof, she said. I just need honesty. She found her courage. Yes, I will marry you, as partners, as people who care for each other. A rare, genuine smile transformed Caleb's face. He reached for her slowly, and when she did not pull away, he held her in an embrace that felt like coming home. I care about you, he said into her hair, more than I have the words to say. Then show me, she whispered back. He kissed her then, a gentle kiss that grew into something real and true. And he was right. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead on hers. We're going to do this right, he said. A real wedding, whatever you want. I want us. Standing there by the fire, Evelyn felt the last of her fear just melt away. She was home, and she was loved. The next morning came fast, but for the first time she woke up without that heavy weight on her chest. Down in the kitchen, Caleb already had coffee going. Their eyes met, and in that one look, they both knew everything had changed for good. James came out, saw them, and just smiled to himself. I'll make a big breakfast, he said. Feels like a day for celebrating. We haven't told anyone, Evelyn whispered. James just chuckled. Don't need to tell me what I can see plain as day. It's about time. He insisted on a proper wedding with the whole town there. Sam would have wanted that, he said, and a bittersweet look crossed Caleb's face. He would have liked you, Caleb said quietly to Evelyn. Said I was lucky. The easy way they talked felt like a real family. When the other men stomped in from the cold for breakfast, Danny was the first to notice. Why are y'all smiling so much? He asked. Evelyn looked at Caleb and then at the faces of the men who had become her family. She didn't want to wait. We're getting married, she announced. The room went dead silent for a second, then exploded with whoops and hollers. Pete slapped Caleb on the back hard enough to make him stumble. About damn time, he boomed once things quieted down. We all saw you two falling for each other. Evelyn blushed. Were we that obvious? Pete just grinned. Only to anyone with eyes. We're happy for you, both of you. The warmth from these men, who'd seen her at her worst, made her throat feel tight. They all agreed a spring wedding after the hard winter felt just right. It would be a new beginning. The day went on, full of hard work, but also quiet moments and stolen kisses in the barn. That afternoon, they rode to town to talk to Reverend Matthews. The minister, A practical man in his 60s didn't look surprised at all. I wondered when you two would figure it out, he said with a knowing smile. The best marriages start as good partnerships. He agreed to perform the ceremony in April, right there at the ranch, so the whole community could celebrate. On the ride home, Evelyn felt lighter than air. Happy? Caleb asked. More than I ever thought I could be, she answered. I'll take your blunt honesty over some practiced charm any day. Caleb's quiet ways felt safer than any pretty words. He reached over and took her hand, and they rode the last mile like that, planning a future that felt real. But Evelyn knew reality can turn on a dime. 3 days later, it did. A buggy rolled up the drive. Marcus Brennan was back, but he wasn't alone. With him were two men in city suits who looked like trouble. And standing behind them was a face she had prayed she would never see again. Thomas Ashford Jr. had come all the way to Wyoming. Evelyn's first thought was to run, but she was done running. She walked out of the barn to face him. Thomas gave her that polished, empty smile. Evelyn, thank goodness, I came as soon as I heard what you were living through. I didn't ask you to come, she said. He ignored her, talking down to her like she was a child who'd had a bad dream. You're confused, darling. It's time to end this little fantasy and come home. This is my home. Thomas's voice turned hard. Your home is in Philadelphia. That's when Caleb stepped right between them. She said she doesn't want to go. Caleb's voice was low and calm. You've got your answer. Time to leave. Thomas looked at Caleb with pure contempt. And you must be the rancher who's been taking advantage of her. I'm getting married, Evelyn announced, her voice clear and strong enough for everyone in the yard to hear. Caleb asked me, and I said yes. Thomas's face twisted from shock to pure rage. How convenient, he hissed. You have been here for 3 months and are already engaged to the owner. Question it all you want, Caleb said, his voice flat. It will not change a thing. Will it not? Thomas turned to the man beside him. This is my lawyer. He is prepared to argue that Miss Moore is not in her right mind, that she requires institutionalization until she recovers. The threat was like a punch to the gut. Evelyn had heard of men doing this, locking away women they found inconvenient. It was legal, and with Thomas's money it was possible. You would not dare, she whispered. I will do whatever is necessary to protect you, Thomas said with a chilling softness. Come back with me willingly, or I will be forced to take legal action. She is not delusional, Caleb said, stepping in front of her. His voice was quiet but dangerous. And you are not taking her anywhere. Thomas sneered. I have connections, Hart. Judges who will listen to me. You will lose, and she will be sent to an institution. Evelyn's world spun. This was her worst fear, but Caleb's hand found hers, solid and warm. You threaten her? You threaten me, Caleb said, his voice like stone, and I do not lose what is mine. She is not yours, Thomas shot back. She will be. Caleb turned to Evelyn, his eyes full of intensity. Marry me, right now, today. Evelyn stared, shocked. He explained it was the only way to protect her legally. As his wife, no one could touch her. Trust me, he urged. Marry me now. Thomas laughed. This is absurd. We have a minister in this town, Caleb said. He looked at Brennan, Thomas's man. You witnessed her agree to marry me. You will testify to it. Brennan looked trapped, but he mumbled, I did hear her say yes. Y'all heard her, Caleb said to the ranch hands. Miss Moore accepted my proposal 3 days ago. Pete and the others stood with him. We heard it, they confirmed. Thomas's face turned red with rage. This is absurd. You cannot force her. I am not forcing a thing, Caleb said calmly, his eyes on Evelyn. The choice is yours. What do you want? This was not the wedding she dreamed of, but it was freedom. It was her choice. Yes, she said, her voice clear. Let's get married right now. Thomas could not believe it. You are throwing your life away on a man you barely know. I know him better than I ever knew you, Evelyn replied. He offered me respect and a partnership. You offered me a gilded cage. I choose him. I choose this life in this freedom. And this is the life I am choosing. I am doing it legally today, so you can never hold anything over my head again. Thomas's lawyer stepped up, his face unreadable. He said, Miss Moore, a marriage like this, under pressure, might not hold up. Evelyn looked straight at Thomas, her voice steady. I am not being pressured. This is the first real choice I have made for myself in years. You tried to control me with my father's business, with gossip, and with threats to my name. When that failed, you threatened to have me locked away. But you have no power over a married woman. The law might favor men, but it favors a husband over some other suitor. Once I am Caleb's wife, you have no say at all. The truth of it all settled in the dusty air. Thomas knew she had him beat. She could see it in how stiff he stood, how his mouth was just a thin, angry line. He could yell and make a scene, but if Evelyn married Caleb right then, his power was gone. In a twist of fate, the very laws that held women down could also be a shield if you chose the right man to stand behind. Thomas finally spoke, his voice low and bitter. You will regret this. When you are stuck out here with nothing, you will remember what you threw away. Evelyn shook her head. Maybe so, but it will be my own regret to live with, and that choice is worth everything. Thomas spun around and stormed off toward his horse, his men trailing behind him. Brennan, however, paused for a second. He looked at Evelyn with a flicker of respect. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I think you are doing the right thing. And then he was gone too. Well, Pete said into the silence, that was something else. Caleb took charge immediately. We have to move, and move now. He turned to a young ranch hand. Danny, you ride to town and get Reverend Matthews. Tell him it is a real emergency. Pete, you go round up anyone who wants to see a wedding. James, I will get the house ready and start on a meal. We have to have a wedding feast. In a flash, everyone was moving. Evelyn stood there for a moment, her heart hammering in her chest, trying to believe it was all real. In just a couple of hours, she would be Mrs. Caleb Hart. The idea should have scared her, but all she felt was a deep sense of calm. Caleb came to her side and touched her shoulder. Are you absolutely sure about this? We can still fight him another way. She looked him in the eye. I am sure. I was sure 3 days ago when I said yes. This just speeds things up. He frowned a little. This is not the kind of wedding you deserve. It is exactly the wedding I need, she answered. You are giving me a choice, Caleb. I am tired of running. I want to stay here and build this life with you. If we start today, instead of in April, then that is just fine with me. Caleb's hand gently touched her face. I will spend the rest of my life showing you that you made the right choice. I know, she whispered. He kissed her then, a soft and sweet promise of all the days to come. The world seemed to fall away, and it was just the two of them. When they finally pulled apart, they saw Mrs. Henderson riding up the path, her horse kicking up dust. She jumped down and marched right over to Evelyn. Danny told me what that man tried to pull, she said. He mentioned you might be needing a dress. She held out a bundle of cloth. This was my wedding dress. My daughter wore it too. And now it is your turn. Evelyn's hands trembled as she took it. Mrs. Henderson, I could not possibly. The older woman waved her off. You can, and you will. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful. Her expression softened. Now you go on and get ready. We will handle everything else out here. Inside the small ranch house, Mrs. Henderson helped Evelyn change. The dress was a simple ivory silk that fit like it was made for her. Mrs. Henderson stepped back and smiled. There now, you look lovely. Evelyn looked at herself in the little mirror. She saw a woman she almost did not recognize. A woman who looked sure of herself, like she was finally right where she was supposed to be. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. Mrs. Henderson just squeezed her hand. Hush now, you are one of us. That is what being neighbors is all about. Now come on, your man is waiting on you. The men had turned the barn into something magical. Lanterns cast a warm glow over hay bales set up like church pews, and someone had even found wildflowers to put in jars. The ranch hands and folks from town who had heard the news filled the space. At the front, next to the Reverend, stood Caleb. He was cleaned up in his best clothes, but it was the look on his face that stole Evelyn's breath. He watched her walk toward him as if she were the rarest thing in the world. The ceremony was short and simple. The Reverend spoke of building a life together in a hard country. But Evelyn only heard Caleb's voice, strong and clear, as he made his promises. I take you, Evelyn, as my wife. I promise to respect you, to stand by you, and to build a life that is worthy of you. I will love you as long as I live. Her own voice did not shake when it was her turn. I take you, Caleb, as my husband. I promise to share your burdens, to support your dreams, and to trust you with my heart. I will love you with everything that I am." And just like that, the Reverend pronounced them man and wife. Caleb kissed her, and the whole barn erupted in cheers. The party that followed was a happy, noisy affair. James had cooked a wonderful meal. Someone produced whiskey, and a couple of musicians played fiddle tunes that got everyone dancing. Evelyn danced with nearly every man there, but mostly she danced with her new husband. "Happy?" he asked, his arms holding her close. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yes." Terrified, but so happy. He smiled. "Me too. We sure did this all backwards, getting married before we even had a chance to court. So we will court now. We have the rest of our lives for it." "The rest of our lives," she repeated. I like the sound of that. Much later, when the guests were gone and the ranch was quiet under a blanket of fresh snow, they stood at their bedroom window. Caleb held her from behind, his arms wrapped tight around her. Evelyn felt a sense of safety she had never known before. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "None," she whispered. "What about you?" "Only that I did not see who you really were sooner. It would have saved us both a lot of trouble." She turned in his arms to face him. "We found each other right when we needed to. That is all that matters." He kissed her then, a long, slow kiss full of promises for their future. As he carried her to their bed, Evelyn finally understood. She had not just chosen safety. She had chosen a life on her own terms with a man who saw her as his equal. She had run from one man's prison and found another man's respect. As she fell asleep in his arms, Evelyn knew deep in her bones that she was finally home. Winter finally gave way to spring 3 months later. As Evelyn stood at the kitchen window watching the sunrise, she rested a hand on her stomach. The ranch was growing, and so was their family. She had not told Caleb yet, but she would soon. They had built a life out of a crisis and found a love that was as real and strong as the land itself. Evelyn knew the signs even as she tried to ignore them. A secret joy and terror bloomed inside her. She had escaped a gilded cage in Philadelphia, but she never imagined finding a life, and now a new life, here in the wilds of Wyoming. "You're up early," Caleb's voice rumbled behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, a safe harbor. He knew her better than anyone now. He could read the worry in the set of her shoulders. "What is it?" he asked gently. She turned in his arms, her heart pounding. This partnership was built on truth. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging in the quiet air. For a moment, there was only shock on his face. Then it melted into a look of pure wonder. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I think a baby will be here in October." His hand, calloused from ranch work, gently touched her stomach. This strong man who tamed wild horses was treating her like the most precious thing in the world. "We're having a baby," he whispered, testing the words. She had to ask, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you happy?" A laugh broke from him, full of surprise and joy. "Happy? Evelyn, I'm thrilled and scared to death all at once." He pulled her close. "Yes, I am so happy. There are no words for it." Relief washed over her. "I was worried you'd think it was too soon." "Too soon?" he said, pulling back to look at her. "We're married. We love each other. Seems to me the time is just right." Just then, James came out from his room, a knowing smile on his face. "Well, I reckon I'm not the only one who figured it out," he said, heading for the stove. "Congratulations, you two." The mention of Caleb's late brother, Sam, brought a soft sadness to his eyes. "Sam always wanted this place filled with kids. He'd be happy for you." The ride to town was slow, with Caleb choosing the gentlest horse for Evelyn. His overprotectiveness made her smile. It was born from love. Dr. Morrison confirmed it. She was about 3 months along, healthy, and expecting a baby in the fall. Caleb listened to every word the doctor said with intense focus. "Your wife is a strong woman," the doctor told him, "but ranching is hard. You'll need to make some changes." "Already on it," Caleb promised. Back on the street, Mrs. Henderson was waiting for them, her smile as wide as the prairie. "I heard the good news. A baby at the Hart Ranch. It has been too long." Evelyn felt a surge of warmth. "Will you help me? I do not know the first thing about babies." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, giving her a hug. "Every woman in this town will help. You are not alone." The words settled deep in Evelyn's heart. This was her home now. These were her people. Word traveled fast in a small town. When they got back to the ranch, all the hands were waiting. Danny let out a loud whoop of joy. Pete brought out a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. They all toasted to new life in the future of the Hart Ranch. That night, as she lay in bed with Caleb's hand resting on her stomach, Evelyn felt the truth of what they were building. The ranch was finally making a profit thanks to her ideas and their hard work. But more than that, they had built a home. They had built a love that had grown from shared hardship into something that could withstand anything. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked in the dark. "I'm thinking that I am grateful," she said. "For this, for you." "I'm the one who should be grateful," he answered. "You took a chance on me." "You courted me with honesty and respect," she replied. "That is better than all the flowers in the world." His quiet laugh rumbled through the room. This was more than enough. This was everything. Spring brought cabbing season, and Evelyn was put on lighter duties. She missed being out in the fields, but Caleb was firm. "You're carrying our child," he'd say. "That is the most important job right now." Their new life felt solid, unshakable. But then a letter arrived from a lawyer. Her stepfather, Thomas Ashford, was trying to destroy everything. He was contesting their marriage in a Philadelphia court. He claimed Evelyn had been coerced, that she was not of sound mind when she married Caleb. He was demanding she return for an evaluation. The paper trembled in her hand. "He can't do this," James said, his face dark with anger. "He is arguing Wyoming law does not apply," Evelyn said, her voice bitter. "He is trying to take me back." When Caleb came in, he read the letter and saw the fear in her eyes. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. "Let him try," Caleb said, his voice a low growl. "This is your home now. He cannot touch you here." He was trying to say, "I wasn't fit to make my own choices." Well, what do you do when someone corners you? You fight. When Caleb got home, Evelyn handed him the letter. She saw the same storm gather in his eyes that she felt in her heart. "He can't do this," he said, his voice low and steady. "He's a man with money and lawyers," she answered. "Well, so are we," Caleb declared, his jaw set like stone. "I'll hire the best man in the whole territory. We'll fight him. I don't care what it costs. He's not taking you from me. Not ever." The legal fight was a miserable affair. Thomas's lawyers painted Evelyn as a helpless fool taken in by a scheming rancher. They were trying to ruin her name just to win a case. The stress of it all wore on Evelyn, making the pregnancy harder than it should have been. The doctor finally put his foot down. "You are to rest," he told her. "Let your husband handle this fight. Your job is to keep that baby safe." It was tough, but she listened. She put her trust in Caleb and focused on the new life coming into the world. Then their lawyer struck gold. He found letters Thomas had written, letters that proved he wasn't worried about Evelyn at all. He was just mad she'd embarrassed him by saying no. It wasn't about protection. It was about his own wounded pride. With that proof, it was all over. The judge in Philadelphia saw right through Thomas's scheme. The request was denied. The marriage was solid as oak, and Thomas Ashford was ordered to leave them be, for good. When the news came, Evelyn read the letter 3 times just to be sure. "It's over," she whispered, feeling a weight lift off her she didn't know she was still carrying. Caleb just held her close. That night, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset, her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. Their child was going to be born free. "Thank you," she said, "for fighting for me." Caleb smiled. "Fighting for you isn't a choice, Evelyn. It's just what I do. And this little one is going to know their mother is the toughest woman in the whole state." She'd never felt happier, sitting there listening to James cook, working on the books next to Caleb, feeling that baby move. This was everything. "Pregnancy suits you," Mrs. Henderson told her one day. "You look beautiful and happy." And it was true. For the first time, she felt completely free, living the life she chose, with the man she chose. The baby came on a cold September night. The house jumped into action. Caleb sent for the doctor while James boiled water. The pain was like nothing she'd ever known, but Caleb never left her side. He held her hand, whispering, "You can do this. You're the strongest person I know. Just a little longer." And right as the sun came up, their daughter arrived with a cry that filled the whole house. A girl, Mrs. Henderson said, laying the perfect, healthy baby in Evelyn's arms. In that moment, Evelyn's whole world shifted to fit around this tiny little person. Caleb was crying, tears just rolling down his face as he looked at his daughter. "She's perfect," he whispered. "We'll name her Sarah," Evelyn said. "After my mother." Caleb tried the name out. "Sarah Hart. It's perfect." Outside, the ranch hands started whooping and hollering with joy. But inside that room, the world was quiet. It was just the three of them, a brand new family that felt like it had been waiting for this moment forever. Those first few weeks were a blur of no sleep and more love than she knew what to do with. Caleb was a natural father, gentle and patient with little Sarah. The whole ranch doted on that baby. By October, Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, holding her daughter and thinking about the year that changed everything. She'd shown up with nothing but the clothes on her back and $3 in her pocket. She'd asked for a mom and found a partner. She'd built a life she never dreamed was possible. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, coming up behind her. "Just how far we've come," she said. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one," Evelyn said, leaning against him. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Caleb hired a Wyoming lawyer who sent a single firm reply to Philadelphia. The marriage was legal, and Evelyn was not going anywhere. Thomas Ashford's power could not reach them here. Over the next few years, the Hart Ranch thrived. The herd grew, and their reputation for quality cattle spread across 3 territories. The quiet house soon filled with life. Their daughter Sarah was born that October. A few years later came a son, Samuel, named for Caleb's brother. Then another daughter followed. Evelyn, who had always loved to teach, started a small, one-room school for the children on the ranch. It grew quickly. Soon children from neighboring ranches were attending. The Hart Ranch School became a beacon of learning in the territory. Evelyn and Caleb had built more than a successful business. They had built a family. They had built a community. And they had proven that a true partnership, built on respect and love, could create a legacy that would last for generations. Their school was now teaching 20 children from all over the county. 10 years had passed since their wedding day. They had faced droughts, hard winters, and every other trouble a ranch could have. They faced it all together. Caleb pulled her close. "You built something that truly matters." "No," she said. "We built it. Together." Their 3 children, Sarah, Samuel, and Margaret, were proof of that. They were growing up strong and free. Sometimes Evelyn would look out the kitchen window at night and remember the scared woman she used to be. She had come to this place looking only for a way to survive. Instead, she had found a true partner, a loving family, and a life she had built with her own 2 hands. 10 years down the road, the Hart Ranch was thriving. Their partnership, forged in that blizzard, had built a legacy. They had better pastures, a small school for local children, and a house filled with laughter. People in town no longer whispered about their quick marriage. They saw a ranch that prospered and a family built on solid ground. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb gave Evelyn a leather journal. He told her it was for writing down their story, a story that proved the best relationships are not about obligation. They are built on respect, equality, and a shared dream. They were a man who found someone to help him rebuild, and a woman who found her freedom. Together, they had built more than a ranch. They had built a life. One day, when Sarah, Samuel, and Margaret asked how we met, I will have this story for them. I will tell them I showed up here desperate, only asking for a job, but you gave me a true partnership. I was running from a life of being controlled, and right here I found what it meant to be free. I will even tell them I married you for protection, but what I found was a deep and honest love. The most important lesson is that you have to claim your own future. And the best kind of love is not about being rescued. It is about 2 people building something solid together with trust. I love you, Caleb. She set the journal aside for later. I love you too, he said, pulling her close. Thank you for taking a chance on a hard-working rancher all those years ago. They watched the sun set behind the harsh, beautiful mountains. This was home, a life she built with her own 2 hands beside the man she loved. That Texas wind began to blow, but Evelyn did not mind that wind anymore. She had learned to plant her feet and stand strong, discovering she was tougher than she had ever imagined. She realized that asking for help was a sign of strength, not weakness. Evelyn had come to this ranch just asking for work, but she ended up finding everything she never knew she needed. As the sunset painted the big Texas sky with fire and gold, she knew, deep in her soul, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Every single challenge had been worth it, because she was finally home, and that meant everything.